And as a little background to add to the short bio that was circulated, this presentation represents an accumulation of work following from an unusually productive field study I did in the late 70s after graduating from architecture school to study the air current systems of solar homes, instrumenting them top to bottom using my physics lab methods, because I had a degree in physics too. That is when I spotted the ubiquitous S-curves involved in every kind of change of state in convection systems, and what made me try to write it up as a general systems theory was noticing that the very same beginning, middle, and end creative progression of exploratory stages was pervasive elsewhere too. The clearest example was in the somewhat magical emergence of 40 or so original building designs, twice a semester in architecture school studio classes that gave me a real, I had such clear memories of that process of building from conceptual to developmental to completed designs, and noticed that the pattern was quite similar to nature's. The connection between hard data enabling research on natural creative processes is what motivated the work from then on. For a copy of the slides, I'll let's see, where'd it go? I was gonna, oh yes, I know where it is. I'll post a link in the chat. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. I have it copied and I'll paste it when I have a sec. And what I'm presenting today is not the only useful view of natural systems, stages of systemic transformation, but it's an excellent anchor for them, tying data patterns to both processes of system transformation and to familiar human experience in navigating and guiding system change on both small and large scales. Now, I need to find the, where's the, I can't, don't see the, I guess I see the slide and the people on the right. So I guess I'm talking to the right people. Okay. Anyway, and so natural growth as a concept and as a natural process of individual opportunistic system development, nature's apparent primary system building method. So one of the first things to address is a challenge as to why do so many natural systems seem to work independently? What makes them individual? And if having lives of their own, and as if having lives of their own, if it's that they grow individually, are they perhaps designed individually too? And that, of course, is the germ of insight that I had that started my whole effort. And is that independence also what gives many new systems relative freedom and independence as they mature? So we learn to see natural growth with my method, learn to see it as both a key indicator concept and a natural creative process, and seen in the symbol at the left and the data curve at the right. And what we look for as an indicator concept is for type A, B, and C stages for emerging system development. The mathematical shapes connected to those that represent regular proportional change, and there are many variations that we see one of up on the upper right, and associations with the emergence of individual new lives as what I call systems that developed to maturity in the end. Starting with explosive growth, then the blue curve to maturity, and then the red dots to engagement in the larger environment the system emerges into. And as a building process, we look for observable, exploratory, opportunistic system building processes, too many processes there. Often not readily observable beginnings or endings. Like studying archaeology, the details are lost in the environment somewhere, and you have to search for them. And so that's one of the reasons that this process has not been recognized yet in science, or it does not seem to have been. Also, its complexity, its multidimensionality, all those things that don't work with forming equations. We look for what animates exploratory resource capture and incorporation. That's what builds the system, is the resource capture and incorporation of complementary opposites that build the structures. The idea comes from the ubiquitous presence of SCurve development in nature, from the physics of energy conservation that requires continuity in energy flow, the internal designs of growth systems that are self-sustaining after their growth that we see all around us. From experience, seeing it in many kinds of creative work and processes, S-curves from inception to completion. The general narrative of all stories as having a flow from beginning to middle and to end, as a succession of building steps. Seeing that growth systems are most often both individual and individually different. And how it was first noticed, I've already said something about some, but noticing that growth is a continuity that results in the end in evolution of free individual new lives. From physics, not studying emerging individual systems that particularly of the type that concentrate energy as new natural systems do. Noticing that feedback loops invariably force change by upsetting their own conditions. That was actually the key observation, that feedback loops are self-terminating and force a transformation to something else. And from experience, talking long into the night about the source of individual differences with my various groups of friends, watching self-organizing cultures as systems developing freedom to thrive, and noticing completing the last detail of a project suddenly makes it more useful. That is a second major insight, that finishing things is what then makes them fully useful. Now, as to the continuity issue, this is the image of a theorem showing that continuity in nature requires growth to get change started. I'm calling it the nth law of thermodynamics. That it starts with a series of n derivatives of the mathematical statement of the conservation laws. And that's what this left image is about. There's the three physics conservation laws are derivatives and integrals of each other. And so I extended that to a large number and then reintegrated that to produce the form of equation that is exponential, indicating that that is the type of process necessary to begin any physical change. And what continuity means is you have a building system. Every stage of building an energy system builds on a previous stage, like brick on brick. To scale, steps must start small and build up in size, and then build down again to reach a new level. So the curve starts small and builds up, and then as it grows in total size, the steps get smaller to stabilize. The alternative is what is represented in quantum mechanics. They leave out time. They have change without time, but change without time does not involve a system. There's a leap with no system. It's only possible for information to do that, which is quite often discontinuous. Still, a lack of evidence does not change nature and the need for continuity and change. Now here's some links to Tyler Vokes and John Stewart's work on meta patterns and combogenesis, if you know about them at all. Natural growth is a process of assembling captured parts into higher ordered systems, combogenesis, as a meta pattern with emergent properties. The Big Bang of the universe is one of the same kind, which began with an explosive growth of complexity. And every growth system begins with its own Big Bang of growing complexity. And then cooperation as evolution's arrow, John's work, system growth is a process of making organized systems with cooperative parts to work as a whole. It is also a process of fast expanding and then tapering internal system evolvability. If you follow the first curve is increasing evolvability and the second curve is decreasing evolvability to get from point A to point B and complete a transformational journey. Ending in a system with high external evolvability in environmental relations, but very low internal evolvability in system design. So that's the point at which something is mature enough to be set free in the wider environment, like us when we grow up. We reach a point where we're really solidly defined internally and very capable of evolving the new relationships externally. How it really works, though, is always ticklish. It's by structural innovation. On the left is a flat image of a 3D idea. The development plane is the growth curve, and the angled network images is this indication of a building up of complexity and building up and refinement of complexity that takes place in the system as a process of developing structure. Structural innovation, by joining complementary parts for the emergent properties they produce, is the key, as seen in the connections of system parts once joined, during the process, that those parts are being joined. And it's an organizational process, organ making, powering both system growth and maturation, joining complementary parts, like a water and a glass are complementary parts. They work together beautifully. So is a axle and a wheel. So are listeners and speakers. And it may follow an AIC, appreciative influence and control pattern, fitting innovation to the system logic, as suggested, AIC being Bill Smith's work, and this relationship was suggested by Gianni DeMarco, a new member here in correspondence recently, which I'm very grateful for. That AIC may be for the system as a whole, part of its way of guiding the development process. Okay, so what's a simple example? The simple example is the very complex thing that happens in building a new house. You have the egg stages of the project, the architect's design, and then the builder's design. First, the architect's design goes through a exploratory and then refinement process, and the builder's design then goes through an actually it's a little less exploratory. All the steps are arranged in an order, and then finishing touches are completed in the end, going from assembling materials to foundations to frameworks, to closing it in, to adding external finishes, to moving in with furniture and so on. And that is when the keys handed over to the new owner for the building's new life. So at that closure, that point of closure being critical to the process. Here's a 31-day growth curve of a farm hen chick. The part that's invisible is the most important part, going from 0 days up to a dozen maybe. It's hard to tell when the slowing of growth begins, but the real explosion is molecular in the cellular multiplying stage. You go from one cell to billions before it's noticeable on a curve, and then there's accelerating growth for a period, but then it straightens out and approaches linear growth as the chick is hatched, and I'm not sure how long it takes, but the slowing of the adult, of the adolescent, and then a maturing adult chick comes to a stop, of course, as they become free to exercise their internal design. And let's see, here's a couple of breakouts of emerging cultures of different kinds. The left curve is the breakout of hip hop as from a neighborhood to a world culture. The curve mentions in the New York Times from 1985 to 2010, showing the exponential growth period being around the 3 or 4 years around 1990, and I'm not sure where it would go. Maybe once a growth period has finished, a journal like the Times might somewhat lose interest because the story's already been covered. I don't know what happens later, but I think the starting curve is a genuine representation of the emergence of the culture as a world culture. And then on the right is the global marine life, fauna, diversity. This is assembled by paleobiology in a journal, and shows the seeming exponential pattern of growth from the 250 million year mass extinction year in the past to the 60 million year mass extinction, which we have heard lots about over time, but this is showing it on a curve of exponentially increasing diversity in ocean life. And then here's us, our great acceleration, all these different facets of modern life growing with the economy. The large curve being the CO2 curve, which shows a growth constant, a stabilizing system with a homeostatic stability on a growth rate, happens to be 1.48% per year. Then there's a pause at World War II when we were busy doing other things, and then getting seriously back into driving the economy. The growth rate of CO2 increased to 2% a year, increased to 30%, 33%. And that's why climate change is accelerating, because we're still on that curve. We're still accelerating the acceleration of CO2. So this is the kind of information that tells us what our society is doing, that we should be paying attention to, but I can't get any interest going from the experts. They are too buried in their expertise, it seems. Anyway, our life of repeated doubling societal complexity and rearranging nature is what this represents. But where's our path to freedom in that? So there are three main development challenges for new lives. Levels of the left, the graph shows levels of short and long-term sustainability. The blue line represents a system that discovers a way to multiply, but only using its first resource. And so it multiplies the use of its first resource and dies out, like a match burning out. Although a match burning out would have a flare shape at the beginning, but then there's the growth to disruption for the purple line for systems that are very innovative in finding new resources and grow to the point where it disrupts their internal organization. Say a runner who is so pleased with running faster and faster, they run until they have a heart attack. Or a relationship that is going wonderfully, and then you make serious mistakes because you're going so fast. You can't read the environment anymore. And then there's the third, the growth to sustainability, where let's see, growth to sustainability, creativity and restraint combine to lead to achieving long-term freedom. And can you think of more personal examples of failures of type 1 or type 2? that's what we would talk about if we paused, but got some room to go here. Growth constants of a runaway world economy. This is the measures of the economy, meat consumption, food production in total, energy consumption, CO2 parts per million in the atmosphere, CO2 emissions, and efficiency, which is the wealth per unit of energy, the energy efficiency of the economy. Now, this curve should startle people. It's a wonderful example of a system behaving as a whole, where the growth rates of all the parts of the system, all these parts of the system anyway, are growing in constant proportion to each other. The GDP at 3.24% per year. This is 1971 to 2016, and meat at 2.60%, food at 2.31, energy at 2.04. Energy is doubling at, I think, 33 years approximately, right? 3 times a century. These are the constants of the economy. These are not thought of as the instability of growing instability of this system on the earth. So these also point to the culture and what the culture is doing. And so the question is, how could the culture change? From a scientific point of view, the greatest concern is the growing third derivative of these curves, because every derivative of a exponential is an exponential. So as we begin to feel the jerk of change as being prohibitive, we should also know that that is growing exponentially. And with it, the drag of ever-growing complexity that blindsides everyone with new emerging crises. That you can read from this curve if you are thinking about the organization of the system and the people who are driving it. So this is just to take it to one extreme, a financial system driving the world existential crisis. On the right is commerce, where money goes in a circle. Where you spend it on costs and receive it for services. And investors, however, put money into the circle to take more money out. So the commerce is driven to grow exponentially in order to provide the compound growth of income to finance. Now that means that we have a boundless carrot and stick growth imperative that we're feeding. Finance feeds business in order to drive it to increase performance for finance. And it adds to an escalating level of difficult of competition within the main economy, and with boundless growing inequality and struggle to keep up. So that's a problem, and we could solve it by letting the tragedy of the commons that it also represents, the undermining of the environment and society with disruptive experiences. That's where we're headed, but that's not really a solution. What a solution would be more like is using the economic system's own rudder for steering it to safety. And I'm showing it as UN science, the blue circle in the middle, although it could be variously designed, that enough of the system's profits are diverted into a strategy for serving the needs of society, and of nature and society. Nature and society regenerate and heal their wounds if finance is maintained but not allowed to continue driving a growth imperative. And so the system would level out, and we'd take care of our futures. Benefits of creativity and adaptation would be more widely shared. Investment would become more profitable, with profits used to care for our assets. So we should care for our assets and relieve society of an escalating dangerous burden. So what the world might understand, if they're not into the system science, is that the earth needs a new life. And nature's plan for new lives might be a genuine alternative. Carrot and stick growth is unfair and exhausting, and forcing people to push ever harder is too big a risk. Relying on, as we see in the addiction crises in America, is huge, gigantic. 90,000 people died this year, I think last year maybe, of having impossible lives. Relying on ever more complex solutions is really dangerous too, famously cited by Joe Tainter as the cause of civilization collapse, as the general cause. That they take they take their solutions to become ever more complex and they fall apart. As we can see, we get, we throw away old solutions and take on ever bigger challenges, as if that was working, and it's not. So what we need is people might also understand it as a need for a well-informed planetary sense of community, not a silo, but a planetary sense of community, to be able to discuss how the world can be made to turn toward freedom. So extending one of Bill Smith's purpose, AIC idea is that purpose is power. Finding the powers that come with your purposes. The general statement here is if type A growth, type B growth, or type C growth as transformations are your purpose, use the powers that come with that purpose. So A, the purpose is individuation, is forming the individual system. And the power is exploration and multiplication, incorporating complementary resources. And B, the purpose, when the purpose is maturation, where you want to reduce complexity and prepare it for a future, the power is coordination. And C, when the purpose is engagement in the big world you emerge into, the power is navigation, where you can use your creativity that you've kept all along to work with a larger environment. And here the germ of the event, the initiating event of growth is the system stem cell, as well as the fertilized egg or the fertile idea, etc. The turn forward, which occurs in the middle, is the insight into responsibility. You're finding your ability to respond to the increasing stress of the system. And then C, small c, is the release to freedom that completes the job and makes the system ready to take its own role. So all kinds of systems use their rudders to steer growth to freedom, each setting sail in a world they were designed for and adapted to as they grew. Gaia, ecosystems, civilizations all often achieve that perfect balance. Cultures often do, societies sometimes do, sometimes have long periods of stability. The American society had a long period of stability, but then got fixated on an accelerating, destabilizing economy. Economies also do, but less often. Businesses also do, and are often exemplars of it, of finding, creating anchors in communities, like many family businesses do, and even some corporate businesses are long-term anchors for their society. Plants, of course, do. A lot of plants die in the process. Animals do as well. There's a lot of attrition in nature. And communities and social groups also grow exponentially at first and then stabilize to serve their needs as their goal and maintain a high level of organization and long-term ability. Personal relationships do too. But of course, we know lots of them that don't, as well as work habits. They tend to reach levels of stability and then grow more or less like a tree, where a tree grows a layer every year. And work habits, we in our adult lives, we grow a layer every year. And then creative home and office work projects, etc., go through the same growth process and reach a point of completion that makes them, gives them freedom to serve their purposes. And the sailboat I picked as a symbol of freedom, as working with nature. So rather than explain a whole lot of varied development paths, we could take a little break and draw some. I'm thinking of let's see. Yeah, I guess we have a little time, and I think this is better than, I have 4 other slides that I'd like to go to, but let's draw some. Now, I don't see, I guess I have to unshare in order to do the whiteboard. And then I need to find the text. And you can, if you know the whiteboard tools, here we are. So this says to go to the top of the screen and pick your your drawing tool and in the format pick a color, and then oh, I forgot to introduce the on the slide before. I'll do one here. Let me see. I'm gonna pick this, and my color is purple. And so one of the ones on the last slide was something that went a little like that, and which was the popularity of doing things right, which grows with rapidly and then becomes an interference and abandoned and causing great disappointment, and then has to build up slowly. So think of a real or imagined life change and sketch it as an arc of intensity. I think I don't like the fat symbol. I think I'll go back to the regular one. But the ideal would be to have enough holistic awareness to take this to take the growth curves to directly to a stable climax. But anyway, no one's picking up on this. I'll wait a minute or two. If I just thought it would be good for you to think of life situations, think of challenges, real or imagined, that you would draw the arc of. It's easy to get bogged down with details because our memories are so rich to see the overall pattern of things. But I've had a tremendous year, and you can use the text option to give it a name. You could name it as what you're thinking about, or as a verb or an adverb of its style. Thinking of the curve as representing the intensity, and if the curve isn't quite right the first time, you could just draw another curve right on top of it, and see the accumulation of curves as the product. Although if you do this, use the select tool, you can select any curve and move it if you want to have it adjust the relationships or erase it. And or we could say, what is there a way to draw the curve of the interest value of my talk so far? I wonder what that would be. I hope it has an ascending and then level intensity. Yeah. So anyway, does anybody have any questions about this? Just chime in.
Yeah, it might be a little bit difficult. I'm not sure people know how to use this particular tool.
Right. Well, there's the at the very top, you take the cursor up to the top and you see there's a black rectangle, and has a select tool and then text and then drawing and the stamp and a spotlight, an eraser, and you can experiment with these, but you basically just need the draw tool and the select tool and the text tool if you want to. Product life cycles, you definitely.
You know, what occurs to me is that I think people would like to ask a lot of questions based on your presentation so far, and then
Right.
maybe at some time in the future you can hold a workshop where people can begin to express their understanding of this.
Right. Well, I'd be glad to do that. We'll have a little time. It's almost an hour, or not quite an hour. I have 4 slides I would like to show. I don't need to go through the whole set up, and you know, I'd be happy to field any questions.
I think people just need more time. I know I do. Need more time to give some thought to this and how it can be used.
Right.
So,
Okay. So I'm taking a screen capture of the whoops. I guess I need to shrink it a little to get the whole thing. Oh, it's up. What am I doing here?
You can save it in the toolbar.
Oh, how do you do those? They're saved. So that goes to, I saved it as a PNG. Good. So I will be happy to send a copy to anybody. Now, I'm not sure why. Oops. So much of it is off the screen and it's not perfect. Anyway, so let me go back to plan A. I thought just a little diversion would be a good thing to do here. And I'm stopping the share and then starting it again. And okay, so here's where we were. The curve at the green curve at the right was what I mentioned. The one below, example 2, is my idea of getting an education. You have a small leap at the beginning of the first period, then a larger leap at the beginning of the next, then larger and then larger and then larger, as the escalation of the difficulty and complexity of the tasks as you go through one year after another in school. But so there are lots of different patterns. And here's the natural pattern for, or as a concept with all the associated terms that I use in the paper. This is figure 5. So there's 3 pivotal events: the germ, turn forward, and release, and 3 feedback periods: positive feedback to start, and then negative feedback, and then equal or equalizing feedback of homeostasis, the third. And there are 3 organizational stages, starting with individuation in the first period, maturation in the second, engagement in the third. In 3 environments, there's an egg environment, nest environment, and world environment that varies as the system changes in scale. It transitions from one more protective to less protective learning environments for engaging with the world. And scientific terms for systems defined by nature are a problem, because we can't define nature. Nature defines things. We can't define what she does. So this is one of the bigger thought challenges in this approach. So there's an apple is something we can check in nature, but it's also a concept, something that we need to check in our thoughts. And we combine them in the meaning of our words, so that a great many of our words combine a direct reference to a natural system or situation, and the cultural values and experiences that we've had with it. So natural language is rooted in direct reference to natural phenomena. Scientific language is rooted in a different way through the mathematical relationships science can construct, rooted in the in being able to check your information scientifically, and then natural language communicates our experiences, values, feelings about the natural phenomena. And our cultures, in fact, define shared member perceptions of reality, that every culture on Earth defines its own reality is definitely one of our problems, especially when you chop it up into little pieces with all the silos around every profession, and every social group. There's obviously, one of the ways that people get noticed is to cause problems, and that's what protest movements are usually about. That their issues have been invisible to the greater whole. Scientific language is rooted in checking data, and so we need to have. So for a scientific approach to natural systems, we need to value and separate mental impressions by where we check them, whether we check them in nature or whether we check them in our minds. And so making that distinction as to where we can check what we're thinking is important thought process development. And then taking pains to retain raw impressions is also important, that they then become a fertile ground for new discoveries later on, if you could refer back to your raw impressions of a circumstance that go unanalyzed, and see if new hypotheses can be developed from them. And so as a process, the idea is to learn a scientific storytelling method using direct references to nature, and along with cultural values. So there's, and for examples, is an old list of story arcs, journeys of growth and change, coming of age arc, transformation arc, true discovery, taming the wild arc, missing players arc, Quagmire's arc. These are all classic stories, and I'm sure there are many more. Novice's arc, what's the typical roles of a novice in a new world, the hero's journey, the home builder, the calm before the storm, plans interrupted, navigator's tale, guardian of the flame, a favorite of mine. There's much to say about the guardian of the flame. Tragedy of the commons, we're in the middle of. New life arc, partnership arc, deadly sins arc, integrity. The story of integrity, that's a wonderful story. Branching horizons is wonderful. Indomitable will, well, sometimes Tom Sawyer arc. So there's all of these refer to natural phenomena that we have a lot of feelings about, and that's the idea. So this is how to fit that with the growth curve. You can see the germ turn forward and release events that punctuate the periods of individuation, maturation, and engagement. But along with each is a story, a symbol, AA, BB, CC, as the symbols associated with each being a vivid story of transformation that you can put concrete references to the physical changes taking place too. So three transformative changes in direction. That's the little a, B, C. Three challenging development periods, the big A, B, C. And three scales of changing environments. That's the individuation, maturation, and engagement environments, the egg nest world. And you start with freedom to express individuality, then increasing challenges to integrate it with complex worlds. And sources of the individuality of natural system growth. I was saying that this is it's an individual process. What I introduced at first, that develops by exploratory capture and incorporation of new parts. So what gives it individuality is the self-referencing feedback loops that grow from and express a complex seed. The seed is I referred to before as the stem cell of the system, is the germ, is the event, some kind of an organizing principle. Like at the center of a snowflake, there's the first crystal has to have embedded in it some kind of unique individuality that is expressed in the outgrowth of it. Individually different opportunities appear to a growth system, and that leads to building networks guided by the character of the system. So it's not a cause and effect thing. It's a discovery process. Growth is a discovery process of each stage by the animating force. And early individuality strongly influences the turn forward as you decide which path to take in your adult life. That's made at the point where you see that you need to take a path, and your character is what is a large part of what determines that, and the nature of the growth process, the individuality of it. At A, it's unformed, but has all sorts of potential. At little b, it's fully formed but undeveloped. And then at C, it's fully developed.